already. But before I go to my inspirational speech, may I make special mention of the chairman of tonight's 50th anniversary celebration, Mr. Rolly De Gracia. Let's give him a round of applause, please. I really wanted to make special mention of him because he organized all of this from out of town, from Seattle no less, and having had a lot of communications between and amongst the classmates, the matatags, and the mas matatags, whom he single-handedly was able to gather together and come up with such a wonderful celebration, such as tonight. It does seem that it's not much. There are only, in a sense, so few of us, but it's not the numbers. It doesn't matter whether it's an event of 2 or 20 or 200 or 2,000. For the most part, all of the preparations are essentially the same. And the difficulty of having to organize an event like this, especially with classmates who have their own ideas about how things ought to be done, and the very strong influence of their respective mas matatags, one can only be amazed at how he has managed to do it. And I think you all know what I'm saying. It is also appropriate that for our 50th anniversary, which is a golden jubilee, we are at the Gold Coast. So I only realized that earlier when I say, oh, Gold Coast. As I was going down the elevators, when you're waiting for the elevators, you can see the Gold Coast logo outside. And I said, oh, yeah, this is for Golden Jubilee at the Gold Coast. What can be more appropriate? And as Lolit was changing in our room a little while back, and she was saying, oh, where's my gold bracelet and gold earrings? And I said, oh, another appropriate way to celebrate by wearing something golden. And so now I also remember that for the first time in many, many years, I'm also wearing my gold bull ring, as I'm sure many of you are wearing it as well. So tonight's celebration of 50 years of service is truly appropriate. And I think that despite all of the problems, despite all of the sometimes negative comments that have come from some of our own classmates about the way that the 50th anniversary should be celebrated, I think it is appropriate that we are here together tonight, having come from all over the place, from Ohio, Daday flew all the way from Cleveland, is it? And from Omaha, and Cynthia also from Ohio would have been here, and a lot of us from out of town, up north in San Francisco and the Bay Area. To come here just to celebrate 50 years of successes, 50 years of trials and tribulations, 50 years of living life. And I always have difficulty trying to think of what to say. And in my many years of service in the Foreign Service, where I had to speak to Filipino Americans and a lot of other audiences, I almost never prepared a speech. because the first time that I did, I was the last speaker. And before it was my turn, every single thing that I had written down had already been said. So imagine if I read my speech, it would have been the most boring of speeches because everything I would have said had already been said. So from that point on, I always, with a few exceptions, I always tried to think of what I was going to say every time I'm asked to speak. And so, for the same reason that Archie had difficulty introducing me, I had difficulty thinking of what it is that could inspire all of us 50 years later, you know, at the sunset of our lives. What more is there to say except take it easy, live life, and so on and so forth. But I would like to highlight two things. And the first is what our good cavalier and classmate and Charlie made. What's the best company?
Charlie!
And he said, persistence. So could you imagine a cadet who was deficient in English many, many years later, and having worked on a book for a whole 17 years, finally finishes one? Persistence. More often than not, many of us give up after a few tries. 28 revisions of a book certainly spells PERSISTENCE in bold capital letters, persistence. And if I may highlight that as something that all of us, individually and collectively, should have, even at this moment where we feel this is the sunset of our lives, we ought to be persistent in everything that we do. But my real main message that I felt I should give you was one which I gave to the Cadet Corps, Armed Forces of the Philippines, in February of 2016, when I fortunately was invited as the guest of honor and speaker. And at that time also, I had difficulty looking for a subject matter which I could share with the audience, especially since we all know, and most of you have been to our February alumni gatherings, no one, and almost no one, listens to the main speaker. Primarily because one, the public address system is really very poor. That's one. Second, it's hot and people are under the sun. Three, they had been there standing for hours. So how can you concentrate on what the guest speaker is talking about? Everyone will be talking to themselves, and there's this buzz like flies flying together, bzzz, because everyone is, in our parlance, conniving, meaning talking to each other, not listening to the guest speaker. So it was really a challenge. But I feel that I surpassed the challenge because of the topic that I chose that day. And the topic is relevance. How can we continue to be relevant in this very, very competitive world when we, already in the sunset of our years, still need to be up and about, and most importantly, be relevant not only for others, but for ourselves. Because if we're not relevant, then what the heck are we here for, right? So I said, there are three things that one must continuously do to be relevant. And the first is know yourself. Know yourself. You will not believe it, but many of us do not know ourselves. So it is a process of introspection. It is a process of having to sit down and think about who we are and what we are in this world. Who we are to ourselves, but more importantly, who we are to those around us, those close to us. Who are we? Know yourself. The second is improve yourself. And it doesn't matter how old you are, or even worse, how old you feel. Because you may be, I am 72, going on 73, and I don't hide the fact that I am that. But deep inside me, I think I feel a whole lot younger. 40, 41, 42, 40s. And that's what they're saying. The new 40s is 70. And so, what else is there to improve? There's a whole lot of things that you can improve on. And only you can tell yourself what these things are. But continuously improve yourself. Improve your knowledge by continuously reading, watching movies. Yeah, okay, watching Netflix, learning lessons from these telenovelas. Mind you, I've watched a lot, and I have learned a lesson or two for every single, series of these telenovelas, whether they're Korean, Japanese, Spanish, etc., etc. So you don't just watch, try to learn something. So always improve yourself. And finally, give something of yourself. Share. And sharing means not only giving, but talking to people, sharing your experiences, telling them of what you've done, telling them of what's inside your head. Because you may have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't share it, it becomes a useless knowledge. And I'm reminded of this morning, as I was talking to my little friend there, Barry's grandson, who after a while, I find out that there are games where some are not like human beings, and some are, square, just like Lego. How would I have known all that if this young man here did not share of himself? And so I had quite a good time just, chatting with him. And so I learned also from Barry and Boy how for many years he was not talking, and then 2-3 years later he went to the Philippines, and lo and behold, when he came back, they had to stop him, short of putting a tape in his mouth, right? So he gave of himself this morning, and I learned something. And I think I did too. I shared a bit, a lesson or two to him. And so today I was quite self-fulfilled just by that one thought. So I repeat, to be relevant, you must know yourself fully. Second, continuously improve yourself. Because if you don't improve yourself, you stagnate. And when you stagnate, you regress. And then everything falls down after that. And finally, give something of yourself. Every time and any time. And it doesn't matter how small or large your contribution might be. Don't even think of the size or the smallness of what you've given of yourself. The fact is, you gave something of yourself. And 50 years after our graduation, 50 years after I felt so full of myself when I graduated, only to find out when I was already a second lieutenant that there was a lot more to learn. And 50 years later, feeling that, 50 years, I've been there, I've done that, I've achieved so much. Again, mistake. There's so much more to learn, there's so much more to give. So tonight, my dear classmates, our mas matatags, our friends and family, I hope that what I have shared with you tonight will stick for a while. And for you to try to digest exactly what I said. Each of us will have different ways of interpreting what I said, but at least try to remember. There are two lessons we learned tonight. One, that of persistence. Second, that of being continuously relevant up to the last day. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you very much. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Thank you.